Okay, this is for the Maimon, the Hosafos, and Daf Kuf Chesam Beis for Parshas Yisro. It begins with a question that we want to understand, mentioned before, based on the pasuk that says in the third month, the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, that the root and the source of the mitzvah of Torah study seemingly is odd. Why is it necessary to enunciate the words of Torah? Why can't we just study Torah, which is to understand it and understand the instructions and so forth? Why is it required that we actually enunciate it? For example, if a person had an edict from the king, it's not obligated to enunciate it, to read it verbally. He can simply study it and understand it. And if he heard someone else read it, that itself would be sufficient to know what it is that the king wants. Why is it specifically that there is a mitzvah to verbally enunciate the words of Torah so many times? However, the concept is innately that it says in every chapter, vayidaber Hashem, and Hashem spoke, lemor, that it should be repeated. And as we explained earlier, that this is the word of Hashem, which must be spoken out in the mouth itself. That it's not enough that the person verbalize it, but it's as if he's saying it in response, word for word. So too, when we reread out loud the words which were already written, this evokes a characteristic of total bittul, a bittul ba'atzmus, because we are simply responding. And when we have that level, we reach that level called Kesser. Remember Kesser, which is the crown that sits on top of the head. So it's higher even than any characteristic of intellect, which is what enabled us to receive the Torah on Shavuos, as is explained. The point being that all the days of sefira from leaving Mitzrayim, obviously until Shavuos, are only representative of the refinement of the 7 middos, the 7 weeks, the 7 middos, that we had to detach ourselves from that Egyptian experience and elevate ourselves to Hashem. And this is why the Torah requires us for 7 weeks to read and to count the sefira, because in the middos there is the opportunity for abduction of the middos. That is, they can be distorted. For example, Avram was chesed, but he had a son Yishmael who was lust, who manipulated the characteristic of chesed. Like we say, the head of Esav is in the lap of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was gevura of kedusha, and Esav was gevura of harshness. And this was the whole initial circumstance when we were in Mitzrayim. But when we came to Shavuos, and now it became the crown to those 7 middos. What does this mean? The crown, as we know, is higher than anything that can be captured through the specifics of the characteristics, and still yet be called ayin, literal non-existence. Like it says, chachma comes from ayin, something above it. The chachma that comes from Kesser is also called ayin. But the truest characteristic, the depth of the concept of ayin, is Kesser. And the chachma is not an ayin mamish, and that's why it says in the Zohar in so many places that the light of Kesser is the light of unsophisticated, sort of stripped down, basic level of rachamim. There's no gevura at all. Whereas in chachma there can be gevura, because sometimes the intellect directs you to be restrictive, like it's called the gevura of Abba. And the reason being that the quality of Kesser is the link between the teacher and the recipients, the matzil and the netzalim, the emanator and the emanated. And that there is a quality of our Ein Sof that is detached completely from anything of ashtalshlus, even of the 4 worlds. Like it says, I am Hashem, I do not change. So that's unaffected even by a lofty level like atzilus. And all the days of sefira, the objective is that we should refine the 7 middos through drawing down this level of moichin in a manner that it penetrates. Then comes Shavuos, where we draw down from a broader sense of Kesser, the makif, the sort of cultural innate characteristic of Kesser, which is ayin mamish. That is the time of receiving the Torah through speech, like it says in the giving before the Aseret Dibros, that Hashem spoke lemor, that it should be responsive reading. That by the Aseret Dibros it says lemor, that which was said before, and this is that quality of Kesser that is called speech, because speech itself is a quality of malchut. It's expressive, like a melech expresses the instructions. But the open mem, the mem psucha in the word midbar, which suggests that it is the director of the speech, that is rooted in Kesser. What provokes the speech comes from Kesser, which is a total bittul, that is simply lemor, to respond. And this is why it says that your words are very comely, from Shir Ashir, like we said earlier, because the expression is rooted in the very essence. A person's identity, a person's essential feeling is expressed through his words. And this is how it was by Matan Torah, that it says, vayidaber Hashem, lemor, that the speech that is said now to the Jewish people embeds within them this characteristic of bittul for all generations, because whenever those words were spoken, their neshamas left their bodies. And that's why they received 2 crowns at this time, one for Nasa and one for Nishma. Next paragraph, ois beis. However, in order to understand why Torah is called both ois, strength, and it's also called tashia. Now, tashia can mean suggestion, advice, and so on. It also can mean to weaken. Also, to understand why it is called shalom in the higher levels, that is explained earlier that there is the origin and the root that allows the chitzonim, that is the antagonists, to hijack Torah and hijack the middos, like Avram, whose midah of chesed was distracted and distorted by Yishmael. And this is what we explained earlier, that when it says that the kayach of the nefesh elokis becomes weakened because it is siphoned off by the chitzonim, by these less than God-centered objectives. However, in order to push away this opportunity for hijacking is in 2 ways. One is through the sefira, and the other is through radiating the light of Kesser, which is that all-inclusive quality of makif that can push away the chitzonim. You know, when the teacher walks in, all the students behave, because Kesser is from the term kares, to cut off, because it cuts off the opportunity for the chitzonim to hijack this spiritual energy. Like it says, all of your enemies will be cut off. The reason being, because the light of Kesser is beyond anything that can be divided up into middos, and therefore there is no opportunity there for the chitzonim to hijack it, because Torah was given from such a lofty level of Kesser, like it says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. Who is Anoichi? I am Hashem, is the very essence of Hashem. And that's why Torah is also called a weakener, because it weakens the opportunists from siphoning Kedusha off. And also we understand that it's called Ois, on the top left-hand column of Daf Kuftes, because it gives strength to the neshama, that it should not be tripped up in Averis, and there should be no opportunity for it to be distorted by these opportunists who try to steal away from the remnants of the middos, because the quality of Kesser is higher than the quality of middos, and therefore it has the capacity to elevate the middos to where they are protected from this attempt at siphoning them off. And that's why it says that Hashem has granted strength to his people, referring to the Torah. And this is why in Torah there are 2 apparent opposites. On the one hand, it strengthens. On the other hand, it weakens. It's a strength to the Yiddin, and it's a weakening to the nations. And that's why it is called Sinai, because it is a homophone for the word Sina, hatred of the nations of the world who wish to hijack the Jewish people. We become unassailable through the strength of Torah. Now we know that the quality of Kesser is called this bridge between the very essence of the expressor, the matzil, to the recipients, like we mentioned earlier. And we know that every middle ground must have a little bit of the 2 opposites that it is joining together. So Kesser has the quality of atzilus, of the very essence of Hashem, and it also has the beginnings, the root, the budding of the recipients, the netzalim, that it joins. And again, this is what a bridge does. It joins together the giver and the recipient. Based on this, through the quality of Kesser specifically, we are able to draw out this divine light from the essence of the giver to the recipient. And that's why every bracha is the quality of Kesser. Like we know, the objective of every bracha, when we say Baruch, that this is Hashem granting strength to his people. Hashem blesses his people with shalom. And this is all a reference for Torah. It's called strength, it's called shalom, because the idea of shalom is that it brings together 2 opposites. Like we know that Torah, since it comes from the Kesser of Hashem, it attaches and knots the light that comes from atzmus, again, from the matzil to the recipients in its solid. And this is the idea of shalom in the loftiest of realms, that is the quality of atzilus, where it is still joined with the giver, the matzil, with Hashem himself. Like we know that Hashem and his life force and all that he causes existence, it's all recognizing Hashem at that lofty level of atzilus. What then is the objective of shalom? That it brings together the higher and the lower. It brings it down here into this world through the quality of malchus, the expression of atzilus, that then becomes the Kesser of beriah. As we know, that this midah is the connection that knots together the light of atzilus into beriah, that just like Kesser joins the giver to the recipient, like we know that in beriah, yitzir and asiyah, they are called worlds of separation, where they don't immediately recognize Hashem, whereas in atzilus, Hashem and all that he causes to be are aware of each other. Like we mentioned earlier, this throne up above, since it is rooted the beginning in the end, that is the Kesser of malchus. Therefore, Torah is called the abundance of peace to its children. And like we say, don't only read bonayech ala bonayech, that these are the two shaloms that it brings about. One is in the Kesser, that it joins together atzilus, and the second is from the term to connect atzilus into beriah, that it should be brought down to that level, the quality of bittul, that is the antithesis of its nature. Beriah is characterized by individuality. Atzilus is characterized by unity. And the Kesser brings the unity, the absolute awareness of Hashem, into an arena of beriah that is not naturally predisposed that way. Like it says that the hosts of heavens, to you they bow down. And it says, if you will be strong with my Torah, which is called strength, I will grant peace for you. It'll be peace for you, peace in the multiple forms. That is, Hashem will bless his people with peace. That is, the two types of peace, bishalom. That is the shalom ha'elyon in the chambers up above, and the shalom ha'tachton in the chambers below, through beriah, as we mentioned. Now we understand this idea of the two crowns that the Jewish people received at Har Sinai. Like it says, that the Jewish people stripped themselves of their jewelry. Like we explained, that this is the nasa and the nishma, that it should be through the speech of the 10 aseres hadibros, which is the malchus, the expression of atzilus, like it says, vayidaber. And the root of this speech was a quality that is Kesser. Kesser, which sources the speech, that is, Kesser is the most attached in speech, the most connected to the world. That is, from the word medaber, that are for each word of the 10 dibros of the aseres hadibros, the neshamas left their bodies. That is, they received these two ksorim, these two kessers. That is, the Kesser of the level of atzilus, the way it is a bridge between the giver Hashem and the recipient us, and also the Kesser of beriah, that it became, or it received the malchus, the expressive characteristic of atzilus, which is the bridge between atzilus and beriah. And these are what it means with bishalom, the two shaloms, that is nasa and nishma, the two crowns, nasa with a crown, and nishma in malchus, as explained. And this is also the origin of the idea of the rebirth of the moon, that it is only on Rosh Chodesh a small dot, that the moon is the quality of malchus of atzilus, as we know, that the levana down here conceals any light at the end of the month. It's dark because it's completely dominated by the sun, and it has no light of the sun of its own. We're on now Daf Kuf Tes Amud Beis, and its top part radiates only from the sun, but its bottom part is completely dark. As we know, this is how it is in malchus of atzilus, that when it's brought up to the level of atzilus, it is subsumed in the lights of Zah, which are called the sun. It has no light of its own. And when it's underneath the level of Yisod, this is the idea of the moilid, of the rebirth of the moon down here. And this point of the moon has no division into the 10 sefiras, because it's only one tiny dot. It's a level of total bittul, like the moon is in total bittul to the sun. Like we spoke about before, the concept of dibur, which again is a form of bittul, because it is expressive only, like repeating after a leader. Then what happens? The light starts to become expanded until the middle of the month when the moon is full. And now it produces or it reflects a lot of light. And this is the idea of building up the nukva of the sefira, the proper reflection in the 10 spheres through this combination. Now, on Kiddush Levana, we know, which we do after 7 days into the month. Why? Because once 7 days have passed, that means that the 7 spheros, chesed and so on the first day, then dibur, etc. And now it's appropriate that we have the full complement of the 7 spheros, that we can sanctify the month, because we have already received it from the 7 middos of Zeir Anpin. Like it's explained in the Eitz Chaim, and from the middle of the month, the 15th, the moon starts to become smaller or reflective of less light, because again, now it's going back up to the level of atzilus to receive from the light of the sun. So the less you can see the moon, count classic point in Chassidus, the less obvious it is, the more spiritual it is. And as it receives from the light of the sun, it becomes subsumed within the light source of the sun. Like we say, while it is absorbing, it cannot express. So the moon is absorbing the sunlight, and therefore it's not expressing any light. And from this, we understand the concept that we said before about studying Torah, that it has to be done with bittul. That is, it has to be like a responsive reading. You're just repeating after a leader. This is complementary to the surrender of the bittul of the light of the moon to the light of the sun, while it is just that tiny dot. And then it comes to have an effect that the person feels a sense of love, that is called the light that radiates in an expression through the Shema Yisro and V'ahavta. Next paragraph. Now we understand that it says on the 3rd month when the Yiddin left Mitzrayim, they came into the wilderness of Sinai. The 3rd month, it was a reference to Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the time of the rebirth of the moon. That this was the 3rd day of the week, of the 7th week. And the idea being that it says for 7 weeks you should count in order to receive Torah, the Sefira Omer. And then on Shavuos, it says that these 7 weeks, which are 49 days, 49 being the 49 levels of understanding, Shari Mem Tesh Shari Bina, that are drawn down into Zah. Like we know the concept of the objective of the Sfiris, and from Zah it's brought down to malchut, which is Shem Ban. As we know, the intent of the word L'Omer, that is, that since it is the birth of the moon, because it was Rosh Chodesh, it is the beginning of the radiance of this level from Zah, like we said before regarding the idea of Kiddush Levana, that is Dafka on the 7th day of the month, because then you already have 7 spheres of Zah, so too in the idea of the sefira of the 7 months. You complete all of them, shachas of Zeir Anpin and malchut, from the level of the Mem Tesh Shari Bina. However, when you have the 3 days into the week of the 7th week, you already have the general idea of the 49 gates, because you have the 3rd day, which is the 3rd characteristic, Tiferes, Chesed Gevur Tiferes, the 3rd of the spheres of malchut. Like we know that the 7th week is the week of malchut. Each week between Pesach and Shavuos, we dedicate to another sefira. And it has already been established that this quality of Tiferes includes Chesed and Gevura. And it has all 3 of these pathways in malchut, the 3 kavim, that are drawn down and specified. If so, once you have the 3rd day of the 7th week, it's as if you have the whole full week, all 7 spheres of this week. And once you have all 7 spheres of the week, you can radiate all 49 gates of Bina. And that's why on Shavuos it radiates from the 50th, which is the level of Kesser in general. And this is what it says in the 3rd month. Dafka, which is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the 3rd day of the week of week 7, they arrived in Sinai to receive the Torah, which is also the idea of the expression of the Kesser that is brought out on Shavuos. Bottom right hand, last paragraph. Now, based on this understanding that from Rosh Chodesh Sivan and forward, we have a preparation for Torah, like the 3 days that they had to prepare themselves, because all of these days are in the mode of receiving from Kesser. And the idea being that Kesser is, as we explained before, higher than the middos. There is no opportunity for the chitzonim, for the hijackers, to siphon off kedusha. And the idea of the sefira is to pick away the evil of the 7 middos from below to above. But then you have that quality of Kesser that pushes away the chitzonim completely. And therefore, we say on the 3rd month they came into the wilderness of Sinai, that it came down this hatred to the Umas Ha'olam, that they should not be able to hijack away, even through like the hairs and the fingernails. It is even any subtlety. And that's why there was total freedom from any opportunity for the chitzonim to siphon off kedusha. And the radiance of the 7 sefiras of malchus were on the top left-hand column, was from the level of Kesser, which is a total bittul, which again is called midbar. And therefore, there is no authority or dominance or opportunity for the chitzonim. However, during the sefiras, until that point, you do, like Avram, again, who was chesed, and he had a son Yishmael, who was lust, which was a hijack of the kedusha of chesed to make it a klipa of chesed. That they came into Midbar Sinai and they went away from Refidim, they came away from that place where they were weak and they could not protect themselves from being stolen. Because now in Midbar Sinai, there is no shlita to the chitzonim, there is no authority. And this is what it means when it says, I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of the land of Mitzrayim. That is, Mitzrayim is Meitzer Yam Ha'elya in the level of Tzimtzum of Malchus, which is called the Yam, because it conceals, just like the sea conceals all that is beneath it. Until, as it says, the feet reach all the way down to give life even to the 70 officers of the nations, which they are called other gods, or the other side of Hashem. That is, that they receive from the other side of Hashem, not from Kedusha, because there are 120 ways that you can rearrange the letters of Elohim, and 72 ways that you can rearrange the level in Kedusha, and 48 that you rearrange and gives an opportunity for the mockers to steal away to support their ideas. And this is what it says, that they were on the soil of Bnei Cham, for Cham being 48, that it was the Melech Elokim al Goyim, because Elokim that is dominant over the Goyim is the quality of Cham Mem Ches 48, the 48 different inappropriate or negative ways that you can reconfigure the name Elokim. And through this, it adds a constant opportunity for stealing away from the chitzein, like we know regarding Tikkun Chatzos, like it says that Hashem comes amongst the nations, and it says, wake up, until to the very essence of it, that it receives from the pselis, the leftovers of the filthy waters in the Yisod of Nukva. And these are the 49 gates of impurity of Mitzrayim. Now, to this we have the explanation of why the Anshe Yericha, the men of Yericha, used to repeat the Shema, but not say Baruch Shem Kavod Mechus Olam Vayid, which is a malchus level, because through this elevation that they elevated even to the level of the Elokim Acherim that they received from the 48 negative computations out of the name Elokim, but in Yichudei Law, that is in such a lofty absolute unity with Hashem, where the first pasuk is the idea of Zah that is higher than the Eitz Hadas, where there's no opportunity for hijacking, and the Yetzias Mitzrayim is this level of malchus, where it comes out of this constraint, out of this tzimtzum, where it is compressed in biyah. Like it says, who will come out of this wilderness? And there is 2 levels. One is the Sarusa de Lasata during the days of Sefira, and the other is the radiance of Kesser that comes from above to below on Shavuos, which pushes away. So we refine ourselves and don't allow the negative connotations to steal away Kedusha, and Hashem reveals himself and it pushes it away. This is called Torah, is called strength for us, and Toshia, weakening the antagonist, because the all-encompassing light of Yechida pushes them away. Because Kesser, again, as we said, is the term kares, which means to cut off. Like it says, all of your enemies are cut away. And this is what it means, that I am Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim. That is this quality of Kesser that completely nullified anything that is beyond any division of the Sfiras. Like on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, that it became this level of Malchus, like that tiny dot of the moon, which sits under the level of Yisod. Remember, Yisod being the last of the internal middos. And this is what it means, lemor. Just respond to what I say, that it's a total bittul. And for this reason, there is no opportunity for the chitzenim, because we're only responding to Hashem. And through this revelation of Kesser, we elevate the level of malchut from beriah, from all of the tzimtzumim, and also from the tzimtzum even of Elokim Acherim, like we said before, that the sound of Hashem radiated throughout the wilderness. That is, even the physical wilderness, where there's filled with snakes and scorpions and so forth. The three complete gimel klipos tameis legamri. All of that tumah was pushed away when the divinity of godliness was revealed, the level of anochi misha anochi. So anochi is what takes us out of Mitzrayim, when it completely negates any opportunity for klipa to steal away kedusha. Like it says, I will go down with you and I will bring you up. It all is a reference to the level of Kesser that went down into Galus Mitzrayim, into the 49 levels of klipa, and then brought them up. Last paragraph. And from all this, we understand why Shavuos is only one day, in contrast to Pesach and Sukkot, which are, of course, 7 days. Because Shavuos, which is the time of receiving the Torah, the level of Kesser, which is a level of Yechida that is higher than anything we can divide up into middos, the 7 days, the 7 middos, and so on, like the new moon, which is 1 nakuda, but Pesach and Sukkot, which are built through the zun, the pirtzuf, that is the combination, the 7 sefiras, with the pnimi and the makif on Pesach and the makif on Sukkot, like we know. And there's also the root of the opportunity that it can be taken away through the hijacking of the chitzenim, like Avram again, who had a son who abused his father's quality of chesed. And that's why they had to bring 70 bulls on Sukkot, because they had to offset the 70 nations who receive inappropriately, so to speak, from the Zion middos of Kedusha. But on Shavuos, which is the level of Kesser, there is no division into 7 middos. It's like a circle. There's no top or bottom, beginning or end. And this is why a Kesser is called a koteres. It surrounds and equalizes from every side, from above and to below, light and dark. And therefore, it's only one day. And now we understand the idea of why mitzvah of Torah study is that it should be enunciated. That you have to say what's already been said, because speech is linked to your choice. You can decide if you want to speak or you don't want to speak. And the origin of that comes from the quality of Kesser. That is the producer of the Zion middos through investing itself in the ratzon. Dibur, that's involuntarily, but you just have to repeat what has been said. This is that idea of nasav and nishma. We just say it. And this reaches to a more profound level of Kesser, that is an absolute ratzon parsha of Hashem, which is called the depth of the depth, which is Kabbalah Satira, through the Gagalusa of Avram Avinu that is higher than the middos of ratzon. And this is that level of Kabbalah Satira, from anochi misha anochi, from the very essence, the pnimi sakes. And therefore, it's only one day, because the ratzon parsha is only for the very essence, for echad. And that's why it's called medaber, which is the source and the root of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, even now when it's spoken, because we're saying what has been said, which is, like it says, I will place my words in your mouth. So when we simply repeat the words which Hashem spoke, we express bittul, and therefore we reach the pnimi sakes. And this is what our sages say, that the whole world is only sustained because of the breath of small children who are simply repeating the words of Torah, even if they don't understand at all what they're saying, because their words, which they are speaking of, the words of the Aseret Dibros, are in fact the words of Torah. This concludes the Maimon.